What's up guys, my name is Andy. Today we're going to find out what the brakes on my 1966 Mustang are not as good as they should be. In a previous video I upgraded the drum brakes on my car to disc brakes, and while they were a lot better than the drum brakes that I had on there, they're just not as good as I think they should be. So let's dig in and find out what's wrong with these brakes. First I want to clarify that doing the disc brake conversion on these cars is still a must-have. That and doing the dual bowl conversion from the single bowl is also something that needs to be done. But the brakes on this car are pretty good. They stop the car a lot better than the drum brakes that I had on here, but it's just not as good as the modern cars that we're driving today. You get used to how good those brakes are. And I understand that most modern cars have disc brakes and sometimes they've got power brakes system. They're much better, no argument there. But when you step into these, you forget that these brakes just aren't perfect. Well, with this car, it was an improvement when I put that disc conversion kit on here. It still wasn't as good as I was expecting it to be. And I wanted to know what the problem was, and I've been thinking about it for several months, trying to figure out what could I do. Was it something with the brake lines? Did I need to replace the brake lines? Did I not bleed the system correctly? I just didn't know what I had done. I don't know if maybe I had bought there's different size master cylinder, the bore in there. I believe I have a 3/4 inch. I'm sorry, 7/8 inch. When I bought it, I wasn't paying attention, and that's something I wish I would have done. There's different size bores for the master cylinder, and that changes the pressure on your pedal. Well, I didn't know what the problem was, and the other day when I was doing the T5 swap on this car and I had to disassemble the brake pedal assembly and the clutch and everything to do the clutch cable conversion, I think I found the problem for my brake situation where the pedal travel is not what it should be. So let's get in there and let me show you what I'm talking about. So here's the position that my brake pedal is sitting right now. It's actually sitting, you can't see it, but it's behind. It's not in the same plane as the clutch pedal. So if I lift the pedal up, see there's this much free play before you get to the point where you can start to push the brakes. And I think the problem I have is I use the push rod from the single bowl master cylinder that I had. When I put the dual bowl in there, I didn't change that rod. And so what I've got is essentially this much. Like if I pull the pedal forward like this, I'm actually pulling the push rod out of the master cylinder, and that's travel that I could be using for my brakes. So when the brake pedal starts right here and I go to push on the brake, I have maybe there's a third more travel that I could have. And maybe that's the problem that I'm having is when I go to push on the brakes, it's only, when I go to push the brake all the way to the floor, I'm only giving it 2/3 of the travel that I should be giving it to stop the car. And my guess is that if I put in a longer push rod, then the pedal will sit out here, more in line with the clutch pedal. And when I go to push on the brakes will start right here, and I can go all the way to the floor with that, and that will just give me more travel for that master cylinder and give me more pressure for my brakes the farther I push this in. So let's take this push rod out and let's take a look at it. All right, the first thing we need to do, there's a cotter pin, there's that silver cotter pin back there. We need to pull that pin out. That allows us to take this brake switch off, and then the push rod, which you can see back here, will come out, come off the brake pedal, and we can pull it out. It's kind of hard to see, so I'm gonna just go ahead and pull that pin out, but just get some needle nose pliers or a screwdriver, and you can grab a hold of that thing and pull that pin out. All right, so this is the pin, this is the cotter pin. So I'm gonna pull that out, and then we can just slide the brake switch off of the brake pedal, and we can just let it dangle for now. And then the brake push rod should just come right out. Well, some of you guys might have that problem, but this is the push rod, and let's go take a look at this on the bench. So here's the stock push rod. I already tore the boot between the car and here, so that's great. So I don't have any more, but that's okay, we don't need it. So here's the stock push rod. This length is obviously not adjustable, so when you want to change the length, you need to get an adjustable system like this. However, this one, I've got these things extended out as far as they can go, any much farther, and the threads aren't really going to grab. So I don't know how easily you can see that here on the screen, but when you line those up, this is only a 1/4 of an inch longer than the stock one. And that 1/4 of an inch is not going to give me enough pedal throw in where I want that pedal to come forward. A 1/4 inch, even though where it pivots from, a 1/4 inch up top is going to make a big difference at the bottom, it's not going to be enough. So let's go put this in the car and just double check to see if this new piece is going to be long enough. Okay, for the simplicity of trying to show what we're doing here, we're just going to leave the brake switch off for now. But because the pedals, it's all hooked up, and what we're going to do is we're going to put the pedal in the rest position where it just kind of falls down and just sits there. And you can see where the push rod is, and if I just pull the pedal forward, you can see that it comes out a little bit, but it doesn't move the piston in the master cylinder. If I let go, see, it just falls, but it doesn't change the master cylinder. That means that this push rod's not long enough. And I think I've figured out actually why I'm having this issue, and it's not so much because I have the wrong original push rod, because this adjustable one here comes at this length, and this is what everybody else buys, so this isn't like I bought a short version of an adjustable unit. I think the problem is you can kind of see it in the back there, that silver ring around the master cylinder is actually the mount plate for the clutch cable adapter that I put in there. And then you add that I have a brake distribution block underneath the master cylinder to distribute the front to rear bias on the brakes. That also was bolted behind the master cylinder, so that together those probably push that master cylinder, that direction out away from the firewall about 3/16 of an inch or so. And that's getting close to this amount of distance that we're having here. So I think that's the real problem, is that the master cylinder is not where it would be sitting in a stock scenario. And while I do need to use a longer push rod, it's because of the position of the master cylinder. That's why I need a longer push rod. So what do we do now? Well, the stock rod isn't going to work, and obviously this adjustable one isn't going to work. So we need to come up with another solution. So back on the bench, let's take this apart. We'll take a look at what we have to work with. If we separate this piece, you can see how this thing was just barely threaded in there, and the same thing is on this end. So we don't really have much in the way of adjustment to make this longer. Obviously it can go a lot shorter, but we don't want to go that way. So what do we do from here? Well, there's a couple things. You can buy, you might be able to find a longer one of these pieces. Obviously you don't need another one of these, just longer with that. And that could be a week out buying, the right piece, and if you can even find one, or we can make something. And I got a couple different solutions that we can do here. One thing I did is I went and bought this is 3/8 24 thread bolt. I don't need the whole thing to be threaded, just enough of it to thread in here. And you can see that already that this is already longer. So the nice thing about that is that I can just cut this down and just kind of grind off the end of it and round it off so it looks, kind of like that. And then I can thread this in here. And now I've got just a longer adjustable push rod. So that's gonna be, I think, option one. I think I'm gonna do that. However, I have a backup plan in case, for whatever reason, this doesn't work. Maybe the diameters are not right, I don't know, we'll see here. But the backup plan is I bought another one of these coupling nuts, and just a shorter bolt. And what I would do is I would just cut the head of this bolt off, so I'd have a threaded, this was cheap, so instead of buying threaded rod, we could just buy a bolt, cut the head off. Then I would thread in, half of it or whatever. I put some Loctite on there because this needs to be kind of a solid fixed unit. Then I can thread that into here, and then this can thread in, and obviously this is much longer than it needs to be, and I can thread this in and thread that in some more, and then I'd get a lot more length out of that. But my fear with this setup is that with everything, with this threaded all the way that way and this moved that way, it would actually end up being too long, and I don't want to have to cut the end of this off. So I think the first step is let's cut this down and see if we can get this to work. So we won't have to use this contraption, and we'll do something much like this. We'll thread this on here, and then we can throw that in there, and then we'd have ourselves the right custom piece. So let's start with that. All right, so here's that piece that we just got done making, and you know, if we, let's see, we thread this on all the way to the bottom. That's still warm. All right, get that all the way down there, and then thread this in all the way. Okay, so that, if we cut, all it is just cut the head of the bolt off. So in terms of length, we're just a pinch longer than where we were before. It was probably, it's really kind of hard to tell on the screen, but we were probably somewhere around there. So we're 1/8 of an inch or so longer than where we were with this piece. So I guess the first thing to do is let's go see if this fits before we get ahead of ourselves. And if that works, then we can start adjusting this out to get to the right length. So let's go put this in the car. Okay, so here's the part. It's in there. Everything fits fine. It's good because the bore size is good, so we're good there. But there still is some play in the pedal. It's not as bad as it was before, but it definitely can adjust that out. So let's take it back out, adjust a little bit, and then let's see if we can find the happy spot. All right, so now that's the next length, and there's just a little bit left. We also have to make sure that there's enough slop in the actual right here where the brake switch, because it sits inside this piece, and the way it works and stuff. We can't get rid of all of the slack, but I think I can adjust this maybe another 1/16 or an 1/8, and then I think we're going to be looking real good there. So let's do that. All right, the final adjustment here. There's just a little tiny bit of slop left, and like I said, we got to leave some in there for the switch to do its thing. So I think that's a good place to stop. Now there's a lot more travel in this pedal now than I had before, so that's good. And it's you know, it's hard to tell, but it's flush with the clutch pedal, so that's where we want it. All right, let's go ahead and button everything back up. I do know that, again, I know that bracket behind the master cylinder is causing problems, and I actually have to address that soon with another issue. So I'll be removing that and hopefully putting the master cylinder back where it goes on the firewall, which means this will have to be shorter down the road when I go to do that. The nice thing is I can adjust all this stuff. I can thread things in and shorten up this rod to be the perfect length. All right, everything's in place. Cotter pin's in place. The brake switch is in place. I mean, look at this. There's almost no movement in the pedal now. This is completely different than what I had before. So we're looking pretty good. All right, another easy fix. That is something you guys can easily do if you have the same problem. So it looks like kind of there's a couple of problems. One, I'm using the push rod from the original master cylinder that I had, and I don't know how deep that rod sat in the original single bowl versus how deep it sits in this dual bowl. That may be part of the problem, and then also because the master cylinder is mounted farther away from the firewall because of the brackets that I have behind there. I've got the clutch bracket for the clutch cable, and then I've got the bracket for the distribution system for the bias of the front and rear brake. So those two things there are pulling that master cylinder away from the firewall, and that's causing a distance problem. So those, and then again, using the old part, that may be a big reason. So being able to make an adjustable push rod like that, and by cutting that bolt down, that worked out great. So you guys might run into the same problem, and you may you may want to do that same route. Again, we also had that other option where we could have bought that. We had that other coupling nut and was going to make a thing together, and I think using that bolt and just cutting the head off was really the best way to do it. Make sure that you clean up the end of that bolt where you cut it off. You saw me grinding it away and just kind of rounding it off a little bit. It's not perfect, but it's better than just a sharp edge. So, all right. So from here, I'm gonna go take the car for a spin and make sure I'm happy with it. But you guys, if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up, and if you subscribe, I appreciate it. It helps my channel out, and we'll see you guys in the next one.